Hello and welcome. Let's talk on the in continuation to adaptation and risk. Let's talk on infrastructure. So today on our 21st lecture, we will discuss about infrastructure, and the first component is what are the risks with respect to infrastructure sector is concerned, and then we will see what are the adaptations options we have. So to cover this, we will take or we will talk on particularly the unequivocal infrastructure risk between urban and rural. So, there is you can very well see in terms of the settlements and infrastructure a great disparity or division in terms of urban and rural is there. And then we will move on to understand the various adaptation options we have in terms of infrastructure, or you say the social or you say the social, ecological and gray or often physical systems. So, the second point, after understanding what are the risk, we will talk about the adaptations option. The first one is social, second one is ecological, third one is physical or a kind of gray systems. Then some subcomponents of that in terms of emergency and disaster risk management and education and communications also we will try to discuss. So, let us see in terms of infrastructure risk, urban and rural settlements. So, what we understood in terms of the risk that is faced by the people and assets from hazards associated with climate change is increasing. So, increasingly the risk in terms of which is faced by the people and the assets, as you say, the material, man and material are increasing as far as climate change related risk is concerned. And these days the documentation have become very perfect in terms of these kind of risks. So, the documentation of climate related events and observed human and economic losses have increased since last decade. So, we are documenting the risks and whatever has happened in terms of this climate change related activities or changes is being well documented since last few decades and more so since last decade. And the observed losses arise from, and through documentation it has been found that whatever losses in terms of climate induced or climate change induced losses arise from single events, from compound events, from cascading events and from systematic events. So, good documentation have given us these kind of observations. It could be single, compound, cascading or systematic. Now, the evidence whatever has been collected or being displayed, this shows that there is an unequivocal or you say the disparity or you say a difference between urban and the rural settlement. So, climate impacts are felt disproportionately in urban communities, with the most economically and socially marginalized being the most affected. Friends, we know this, we all realize this. There is a disproportion. The urban community has a different set of access, whereas they are economically sound, but as far as the marginalized or socially or little poor people, they are the most affected. And all of us have gone through the COVID-19 pandemic just 4-5 years before, and we have understood that this COVID-19 pandemic has had a substantial impact on urban community and the climate adaptation. So, we will talk about this in terms of the health. So, such kind of pandemic has already given us a lesson, and we have already suffered a lot as far as this is concerned. So, friends, coming to the adaptation and the city and the local government, the shift from urban planning to action in ways that identify and advance synergies and co-benefits, migration, adaptation, sustainable development goals. This have become slowly, the shift has become little what you say slowly and unevenly as far as the shift from urban planning to action. So, what we try to understand through this point is the in terms of action oriented urban planning as far as the climate risk or climate adaptation is considered, this action is relatively slow and it is uneven. So, in terms of adaptation, mitigation and achieving the SDG goals. So, there is a unevenness, there is slowness as far as the action is concerned. This is a general observation. So, urban adaptation gaps exist in all world regions, although exposure to the limits to the adaptation is unevenly distributed. So, taking forward or moving forward from the point 1, this urban adaptation gap exists. There exists a gap in terms of adaptation in urban areas or urban settlement, and then there is, and also the exposure to the limits to adaptation is very unevenly distributed. So, some part of the urban area or some people or some locality of urban area, they are getting a different treatment or different facility of exposure than another group or another population. So, there is a, what you mean to say, there is a disparity. So, this also in terms of infrastructure investment also constrain how all cities and settlements are going to adapt. So, in the constraint, in terms of constraint is how much the investment is there, how much money we are putting into this as far as the adaptation in terms of urban settlement or infrastructure is concerned. So, that is a key in terms of the investment. Slow uptake of monitoring and evaluation frameworks constrains potential for developing climate resilient urban development pathways. So, there is very slow in terms of monitoring work, in terms of evaluation work. So, these are also add to the constraint which is already by the infrastructure, by the investment. So, this monitoring and evaluation process, it again adds to the slow and the disparity nature as far as the climate resilient urban development pathways are concerned. And as far as the cities and the local government, you say that governs the city, are among the multiple actors, they facilitate climate change adaptation in various cities and urban areas. As far as the investment is concerned, this investment in urban adaptation has not yet kept pace with the innovations. So, on one side we have science and technology based innovations are there. On one side, to take this into practice, to take this into real adaptation, we need investment. So, there is a gap between the investment in terms of urban adaptation, what is coming from the innovations in terms of climate change adaptation, and so investment and gap in terms of policy and the practice. So, innovation on one side is always leading. So, or otherwise the investment policy and practice are lagging behind in terms of the science and technology based innovations. The greatest gains in well-being in urban areas can be achieved by prioritizing investments to reduce climate risks for low income and marginalized residents and targeting informal settlements. So, major gain or substantial gain will happen if we can prioritize the investment, so that the low income groups, the marginalized residents, the informal settlements. See, the structured, the more formal, the high income group, they have money of their own to take care or to adapt to this climate induced risks, but the sufferers are the low income marginalized residents and the informal settlement. So, if we prioritize the investment towards them, then perhaps the greatest benefit will be served to the mankind. Then coming to inclusive action, intersectional, gender responsive and inclusive action will accelerate the climate change related adaptations. So, global urbanization offers a time limited opportunity to work towards widespread and transformational adaptation and climate resilient development. So, we need to keep pace, we need to speed up, because the global urbanization is growing fast. So, our adaptation or climate resilient development also has to move fast. So, the opportunity is time limited. We need to move fast or at par as far as the global urbanization is concerned. Now, coming to the infrastructure as far as the adaptation is concerned. Friends, what happens? The adaptation as far as the infrastructure is considered can be divided into broadly into three parts. One is the social system, another is the ecological system, and the third is the gray or a physical system. So, some intervention or some construction of the wall, civil constructions or technological interventions. Okay. So, adaptation pathways are composed of sequences of adaptation actions that are connected through collaborative learning with the possibility of enabling transformation in urban and infrastructure system. As I just mentioned, dominantly three systems are considered, and they need to be safe, satisfying and productive. In that way it serves safe, satisfying and productive life in city and around or the rest of the places. So, what is social? So, social infrastructure includes housing, it also includes health, education, livelihood and social safety nets, cultural or heritage institution, disaster risk management and security and urban planning. So, all these fall under the social infrastructure. Similarly, the ecological infrastructure, the moment we talk about ecological infrastructure, this is green, this is nature friendly, or we say nature based solutions or nature based services. Temperature regulation, you take some measure, so that temperature is regulated automatically. You go for plantation based on their evapotranspiration property by the plants, they behave in terms of what they regulate the temperature. Okay. So, flood protection and urban agriculture. So, these are all eco-friendly or green ways of adaptation as far as the infrastructure is concerned. The urban adaptation gap is also found to be very unequal. The poorest quintile has a larger adaptation gap than the richest section. So, this kind of observed inequalities indicate that the markets, government actions and civil society investments available to reduce vulnerability and the risk among the poor have not been observed to offset the inequalities based on individual and household capacities, very clearly mentioned here. So, we know that there is inequality, there is disparity between urban and rural, between economically rich and economically poor population. So, this itself indicates that there is a gap, or there is disproportion in terms of government action, disproportion in terms of civil society investment, disproportion in terms of the market. So, this itself says that there is inequality based on individuals and household capability. So, we need to work on that. So, this this is a main bottleneck or major bottleneck as far as the adaptation is concerned through this in the social systems. So, look at this beautiful depiction picked from this report, 6th chapter of working group 2. So, friends, if you see here, just this is the urban adaptation gap to current climate risk. So, On the left hand side, the adaptation actions deployed have shown in 3 different colors in terms of current adaptation, the blue, the planned structure, the planned adaptation is the magenta, and on this side is the yellow, is all currently possible adaptations. And in terms of inequality, high and low, 2 types have been taken. So, high the upper 20%, low the lower 20% of the exposed population has been shown. And look at the second what you say, the second row, which depicts for Asia, Central and South. So, South and Central Asia. And as far as these 5 different columns are concerned, shown in different histograms or bar diagrams. The first one is adaptation to rain or the river flooding. Second is adaptation to storm or coastal flooding. Third is adaptation to heat waves. Fourth is adaptation to water security, and fifth is adaptation to food security. So, this way if we try to analyze the graphs in terms of the South and Central Asia, the adaptation to rainwater flooding is very high as far as the upper 20% of the exposed population in terms of inequality, whereas the lower is very less as far as the current adaptation is concerned. The lower one, if you see in terms of the planned adaptation, it is almost matching to that, but in practice it is differing a lot. And similarly, the next one, adaptation to the storm or coastal flooding, also gives a similar kind of impression. There is a lot of lag, there is a lot of disparity, there is a lot of difference between the Asia, the what you say, the inequality which is coming from the upper 20% and the lower 20% of the exposed population. So, similarly, the third one is adaptation to heat waves, fourth one is adaptation to heat security, fifth one is adaptation to food security. So, all these actually makes that kind of representation, and it is very prominent. There is disparity between what you say upper and lower 20%, and similarly we can see the sectional difference is also prominent in terms of the adaptation. So, there is a gap and the gap is prominent. Now, in terms of the social infrastructure. So, adaptation to social infrastructure refers to social, cultural, financial activities and institutions as well as associated property, buildings and artifacts that can be deployed to reduce risk and recover from loss. So, as when we talk about social infrastructure, this is all this fall under this. Now, within the social infrastructure, if we take the example or take the case of land use planning does play a very important role because it decides siting of settlement. So, land use means which land will be utilized for what purpose, and here the purpose is the siting of the settlements or infrastructure. So, in relation to the climate change, it affects whether development takes place in locations that are exposed to hazards or not. So, the land use planning is very important because if certain places, certain areas is exposed to hazards, certain areas is exposed to the extreme weather events. So, our land use plan has to be that way that it should have no or minimum exposure to any kind of climate change or climate change induced risks or exposures. So, land use planning is very important, and while this kind of land use planning is taken care happens, we must take care of the rural people, the urban people, the different sections in terms of the income capacity, so that we will do a fair thing as far as the land use planning is concerned. It is well taken care at that level. So, land use planning plays a major role in the siting of settlement and infrastructure. In relation to the climate change, it affects whether development takes place in locations that are exposed to hazards. So, next is livelihood and social protection as far as this is concerned. Understanding how the livelihood, particularly the urban poor, are both impacted by climate risks and how they might be strengthened is the central to understanding climate adaptation. So, two very important points have been outlined here. So, the first one is, let us understand, to understand the livelihood of these people, of the society or the population, particularly with respect to urban poor, both are impacted by climate risks. So, how they might be strengthened is the central to the understanding of climate adaptation in cities and settlements. So, as far as the livelihood is concerned, from this point of view, how different sections will be strengthened both in cities and various settlements. Rapid urbanization and expanding physical infrastructure do not have a clear relationship with improved outcomes. So, this is what we want to discuss or highlight here, that urbanization is going on rapidly. The infrastructure, particularly physical infrastructure, also moving on or expanding fast, but they do not have a clear relationship as far as the livelihood and low income residence is concerned. So, the growth is going, urban infrastructure is going, and different income group residents are there, but there is mismatch and there is no provision to improve the outcomes of this livelihood of the low income residents or people who are there in the urban space. The municipal and national efforts need to be closely aligned with building adaptive capacity of residents, often through community based adaptation. So, here comes the role of the local government, the city or the municipal corporation. So, what they should align building adaptive capacity of residents through lot of community based adaptation. So, a group, a section, they lot of different variations in the adaptation or community based adaptation should be practiced, which is more conducive to them. So, in that case, ASP, the adaptive social protection, is defined as a resilience building approach by combining elements of social protection, disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, so as to break the cycle of poverty and vulnerability of households by investing in their capacity. So, what does it indicate? It is the adaptive social protection. So, within them, within various sections within there, so we need to invest based on their capacity, their household strength and varieties. And the next term is with respect to safety nets. Safety nets are intended to protect vulnerable households from impacts of economic shocks and natural hazards and disasters. So, always there has to be some kavach or safety net. So, it is a kind of protection net which is intended to protect them from different kind of variation, which is in terms of economic, natural hazards and disasters that are arising out of this climate risk. So, now let us talk about the emergency and disaster risk. Friends, all of us know that we have been putting lot of early warning systems. So, there is a growing evidence of the benefits of early warning. If we know in advance, then we become cautious, become careful. So, particularly for urban preparedness, a kind of decision making and action for climate or weather related hazards, while climate forecasting is also happening. So, warning and forecast, you forecast few days or some time in advance. So, this is also increasingly a central tool for risk management agencies. A focus on urban areas or key infrastructure is still considerably rare. So, what we mean to say, there have been early warning system, there have been a risk or the forecasting system, but what is still rare is the focus with respect to urban area or a focus with respect to to key infrastructure. So, what we mean to say, there needs to be improvement in the early warning system or the forecasting system to protect or to save or to bring our urban areas and the key infrastructure under the safe net. The existing early warning systems remain insufficient, and the complexity of urban landforms make accurate and detailed early warning much difficult. So, we are still, the early warning system are still not sufficient. I would not say insufficient, it is still not sufficient. We have to, and it needs to integrate a lot of complexities, and detailed early warning also may be difficult because lot of local complexions, lot of the scale, the everything matters. So, it may sometime happen that local level or very detailed early warning may be difficult, but we need to work on that. The inclusion of local knowledge and indigenous knowledge system, it is very important. So, local knowledge and indigenous knowledge system needs to be integrated with this early warning system, or this or has to be evaluated as far as their strength or what you say the strength is concerned, in order to integrate them in this kind of climate forecasting purposes. So, knowledge or inclusion of this local knowledge and indigenous knowledge is important, and that need to be evaluated properly, and if possible that need to be integrated in the early warning systems and also the climate forecasting exercise. So, insurance is a risk transfer mechanism for middle to high income countries, but yet it is less widely available. So, we need to work on the insurance also, because that gives a safety net in terms of the social system is concerned. Universal health coverage. So, coming to the health, as far as the universal health coverage is concerned, it is essential. It is essential component of the climate resilient health system. But what happens in most countries, access to health services is better in urban than in rural areas. We know countries like ours, we have better healthcare facility in urban areas than in comparison to the rural areas, and similarly the evidence is greatest for impacts on larger health facilities. So, such as hospitals, you see there is large hospitals sitting here and there or installed here and there, but there is less evidence regarding the impacts on the health services delivery outside these settings. So, inside the hospital premises it is perfectly fine, but outside, that means we have population, people living in many other places, many small what you say villages and setups or communities. So, there the evidence is very less, that means outside of this big hospital setting, such as smaller health facilities, the pharmacies, the first responders, the public health inspectors. So, all these are still very insufficient. So, from climate resilient health system point of view, we need to work on them. Then city level and local government adaptation planning is facilitated by information on health impacts, highlighting the need for monitoring and surveillance and the need for local evidence based risk assessment. So, this is what we understand, that we need to integrate them and we need to monitor. There has to be a good surveillance mechanism, and local evidence based risk assessment also is beneficial to, and means beneficial because it integrates the local knowledge into decision making process. So, education and communication, the next aspect is education. Friends, if the children who spend a lot of time in schools, they also can be motivated, their curriculum can be oriented in terms of adapting to educational infrastructure. Similarly, the making physical structure safe with the knowledge and confidence also helps in terms of supporting individual and family based adaptation. Communication strategies developed in formal education and social media can also be highly influential. Similarly, the informal learning that take place outside of school settings such as library, botanical gardens and other different means are also very important, because they nurture in terms of lifelong learning and nurturing environmental citizenship and activism towards the climate risk and adaptation. Similarly, the next one is the grey or physical infrastructure. So, construction of dams, construction of different sea walls, slope revetments and river leaves are means fall under the grey infrastructure. The physical infrastructure, all of us put air conditions in our homes, cars and other places. So, these are the means in terms of grey physical infrastructure to adapt to the climate risks in terms of the infrastructure. So, what I mean to say, this availability of grey and physical infrastructure is also there is a disparity, there is a affordability factor. The people or the group section of people who can afford to this kind of physical infrastructure are there, but others may not do. A lot of this lower or medium income group people may not have this access to this kind of things. The design process for physical infrastructure projects and significant constructions typically includes risk assessment and social and EIA, environmental impact assessment, that consider the neighboring land uses and connected infrastructure. So, building design and construction, passive cooling. Look, all of us are doing this in terms of the most promising adaptation measure are a combination of solar shading with increased level of insulation. The passive cooling is achieved by controlling the interaction between the building envelope and the natural elements. And as far as the energy is concerned, adapting to low carbon energy infrastructure improves its resilient, or you say improves the climate resilient. So, here we need to adapt to low carbon energy infrastructure. So, that means which is low carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide equivalent, as all of us know it is a greenhouse gases. So, whatever infrastructure we are using, that has to be low CO2 equivalent in terms of the energy release or energy requirement. Adaptation of road and rail network also in terms of rerouting or coastal protection, all this contributes to grey physical infrastructure. Similarly, utilization of public transport, investment in public transport, transient orient development, these all actually contributes towards green and physical infrastructure. We also need to work in terms of solution space for the policy and action gap. This is a kind of formulation where you can see a multi-level, place bound and various sections of this in terms of the activities that we discussed could lead towards policy action gap. And for this, the 6th chapter has been picked as far as the reference, and these 2 depictions also have been taken there, and we discussed these 5 points, and broadly we talked about the disparity, urban, rural, poor, rich, economically affordable and not affordable section of people. Then the 3 different sectors, social, ecological and grey physical sectors, and also we talked about the different risk management in terms of early warning, prediction, education and also the communication. So, thank you very much.